Hello. In this recording, I'd like to go over how to look at this data that we have here. Notice it's a collection of car hash objects, and I think a goal here today is to um, go over how to represent the hashes as objects. How do we transform the objects, or excuse me, the hashes into a collection of objects, and then how do we interact with the collection using enumerable. So those are our goals for this lecture. So let's start with looking at the data. We have car data as the variable. Notice the array syntax, and then each element is actually a hash with 3 key value pairs: the make, the model, and the year. And so that's great. A lot of times when you make calls to an API, a website API, you'll often get data back in some sort of format like JSON, which is very common in JavaScript. And if you're consuming that using Ruby, you'll convert that JSON into something usable like this, which looks very, very similar to JSON, which actually makes it very nice to work with. So once you get into that state of converting JSON into a Ruby collection like this that you can interact with, then you can start to model the data the way that you want. And so that's what I'm going to start with. What I want to start with is actually creating a class, car, which we're going to use to model the make, model, and year. So I'm sure I'll have some sort of readers for those. And when I initialize this object, I'm sure I'll get the make, model, and year. And then I need to assign those instance variables. So that they can persist throughout the object. And then oftentimes I recommend creating a 2s, whether you use it or not, just to kind of let the object, actually maybe I'm going to leave that off for now because I want to demonstrate what it looks like when it's not there. So this represents, a car, and if I were to create one myself, a car, car.new, make Toyota, model, could be, I'll just reuse what I have up there, Highlander, and year 2000, right? And then I can interact with this thing, dot make, and run it. And there I get Toyota or whatever. Now notice what happens if I put S, a car. I get this weird object ID looking thing, and that's what happens when you don't have a 2s string or method. So if I put that in, so I'm just interpolating the values in here. And then I run this program again and print it out. Notice the difference. So this time I get, instead of this weird object ID looking thing, I actually get the value that is from the 2s method. So that's where I kind of find it handy to create a 2s method on object. Uh, you'll never know. A lot of times it does end up being used and is helpful. So I'm going to leave that there. All right, so we've created some, example of how to use the car. But now I need to get back to one of my goals. How do I transform this collection of hashes into a collection of objects? And so I want to take the car data and convert each one of these into an object. So let's do that. And so what I'm going to do is take the car data, and I'm going to do what's called a map. Map is going to go over, it's kind of like each, where you iterate over one element at a time. But map says instead replace each value at that element spot with what's inside of this block. So I'm actually going to assign this to a variable because you'll see the difference here. And I'm going to take each element while we're iterating and map it to a car. So I'll just do car.new, car.make, car.model, and car.year, like that. And so I can put s the cars, and you'll see what I'm going to do is I'll print out the car data, and then I'm going to put s the car objects. So I'll show what that looks like here now. Okay, what did I get? Undefined method make. Oh, okay. So I'm just accessing the values wrong. That happens. So I need to get the values out of the hash. They're not objects yet. So I need to access them by their key. There we go. Let's try that. Okay, cool. So here's the car data. That's as we expect it to look. But then I converted each element into a car object. So each object, when they were printed, just used their own 2s and printed out a nice, cool little string. Okay, awesome. So we have that conversion happening. Comment that out for now. This is working. So this, I'll put a little comment here. This is the actual transforming of the collection of hashes into a collection of car objects. Okay, cool. And I think once you have this set up, this cars here, I mean, yeah, that you can do that. You can cars.reverse. So you can see them in reverse. Yep. So that's the original, and this is the reversed list. Let's see if we switch over to let's see. Here's the goal here. How do we interact with collection using enumerable? Well, the Ruby library has a enumerable module that you can use with a bunch of cool methods here on the side, and I would highly recommend getting familiar with these. Take like a read through to see what they do. But there's, you can find things, find all. Map, here's the map that I was talking about earlier. you know, the min, the max, sorting, various things like that, which is really, really helpful when you're interacting with collections. So, for example, let me show you how to do like a find all. For example, find all. Let's see. Above 2,000. So I want to go through the cars and do a find all. Go through the cars, find all where the car dot year is greater than 2,000. And see what that gives us. Ah, so I can't use a comparison of a string with 2,000, and I know exactly where what the problem is. So line 46. Well, line 46 is where it's trying to do a comparison here. But actually, all right. So notice the data. If I look at my data, my year is actually represented as a string. And I can't compare a string to an integer, right? It just doesn't make sense to do that. So for example, I jump into IRB and I try to compare 2,000 equal to 2,000. So 2,000 string compared to 2,000 integer, it's going to get false. If I try to do 2,000 is greater than 2,000, that's the same error message that I got in my code, because it says, what are you trying to do? You can't compare a string with the integer 2,000. You have to actually compare actual values, actual integer values. So that's a quick aside. That means in here I got to fix my code. So what I'm going to do is when I initialize my car object, I'm actually right here, I'm going to convert it to an integer. So it won't be a string anymore, it will actually be an integer, and then I can compare from then on. So I think this should work now. Cool. So there's my original collection, and it found all any cars that with the year over 2,000, which I had two. So that's awesome. Well, that does it for this lecture. I recommend you also, take a look through this code, take a look through enumerable, and there's a lot of helpful things in here that I think is going to help you in the near future. So thank you very much. Talk to you later.